If the Strip is Vegas for those willing to burn money like fireworks, where a $30 cocktail is commonplace, where spending $5,000 on dinner might be seen as small change, and where every square foot is designed to maximize spending by international high rollers and conference crowds, Fremont is like the dark side behind the scenes, where the city is forced to live on what's left behind the glamour. Here, the dilapidated casinos, cheap hotels and crowded streets are not a systemic flaw, but the final product of a model that has been operating for too long. As the Strip was constantly being pumped with money, polished and protected by private security, any issues that didn't fit the tourist image were pushed out, and Fremont became the place to receive them all. For visitors, Fremont is a more authentic experience. For the locals, it's a place they avoid. Vice, latent violence and despair are no longer isolated cases, but are gradually becoming part of daily life. The streets that were once the heart of Las Vegas now most clearly reflect the price this city has paid for its choices. In today's video, we'll hear from the people of Las Vegas about something the media never mentions. Why Fremont Street isn't just deteriorating, it's slowly becoming America's worst nightmare. Welcome to Fremont Street, where Las Vegas seems to have shed the veneer of the Strip, and also the safe distance that resorts erect to maintain the illusion of luxury. Here, the lights still blaze like a storm of stars, but just by looking down at the street, you immediately recognize a different Vegas. More tired, more chaotic, and sometimes more unsettling. The Fremont experience is the clearest symbol of the effort to keep downtown bright and fun. The giant LED dome covered the entire sky, making the night here as bright as day, and the music echoed like an endless festival. But if you stand long enough, you'll understand that the dome only covers the weather, not the underbelly of urban life, the gaps in social welfare, the cracks in the economy, and the people Vegas still seems to struggle to place. According to point-in-time count data, Clark County recorded nearly 8,000 homeless individuals in 2024. And downtown is where that pressure is most visible, as everything here happens outdoors, right in front of visitors. Fremont Street became the intersection of three coexisting currents: tourists seeking old Vegas and expecting a less expensive experience than the Strip, locals wanting a place to have fun without the high cost of resort and parking fees, and those who rely on the street economy, where a busy night can determine an entire week's survival. And precisely because Fremont is where those currents converge, it has also become a sharp cross-section of society. What exists here is both the remnants of the glamorous Strip and the decaying underbelly of a giant tourist city. Therefore, beside the issue of homelessness, what worries many tourists the most is often the feeling of danger. According to the Las Vegas Metro Police, LVMPD, they have a weekly crime report broken down by area command, meaning downtown, including the Fremont area, is monitored as a high sensitivity zone due to the density of people and the number of events. Not a few incidents have occurred, causing loss of life and property right in this area. Of course, the number of such events is not enough to conclude that Fremont is the most dangerous place in America. But it's enough to explain why many people call Fremont a worst nightmare. Not because everyone experiences disaster, but because just one wrong moment can turn into a terrifying nightmare. What's remarkable is that Fremont didn't need a major act of violence to turn into a nightmare. Sometimes, nightmares stem from small, gradually accumulating signs: overcrowding, overstimulation, intoxicated people, petty arguments, music and shouting, which slowly erode the sense of control. This contrast is like there's the tale of two Vegas. On one side is a global money-making machine wrapped in a perfect shell. On the other is the intersection of tourism and real life, where urban cracks cannot be hidden by marketing. Many people used to come to Fremont to find the real Vegas, but what they often found was a city consuming itself, trying to be both a festival and a dumping ground for consequences that others didn't want to see. Fremont isn't a bad street. Fremont is an example. It shows Vegas is changing from hospitable to overburdened, from an inviting city to one struggling to cope. And if you think Fremont is just a cheap entertainment spot, then you probably haven't seen the two Fremonts coexisting at the same time, one for tourists and the other as a backyard for locals. If the Strip is the global money-sucking machine, where every square foot is designed to turn emotions into spending, where you buy the illusion of control with money, security, order, cleanliness, curated experiences, then downtown, especially Fremont, is like a reaction chamber, a place where locals and tourists collide, where you most clearly see the changing feeling of Vegas, and also where you most easily sense that a tourist city sometimes sells not just fun, but also its own pressures. The most contrasting thing about Fremont is the same scenery, but two different feelings. Visitors come to Fremont to find old Vegas, to find cheaper prices than on the Strip, to find a sense of nostalgia they thought had disappeared in the glitzy resorts. But the locals enter Fremont as if they were stepping into a place that was once home, and is now increasingly resembling a crowded event that they can't control. In that sense, Fremont is both a haven for those seeking an affordable Vegas experience and the backyard where the city's social pressures are most clearly revealed, because downtown is where everything converges and is difficult to filter. Vegas is always busy. The problem lies in this. It's crowded and tiring, crowded and stressful, crowded, and you feel like an outsider in your own city. On the Strip, crowds are guided by walkways, cameras, security, unwritten rules. Chaos is pushed backstage. And in Fremont, the crowd is the air you have to breathe. It creates a festive energy, but also makes the place vulnerable to being defined by its worst moments. Just one fight, one shove, one moment of loss of control is enough to bring the whole story down. Fremont is the public underbelly, the public bottom rung. It's not because it's poor, but because it's a public space where all issues are forced to be exposed to visitors. This is where you see economic stratification not through room rates, but by the way people walk in, who enters with the mindset of going out, and who enters with the mindset of survival. This street makes you feel like the fun can change direction at any moment. That difference makes Fremont a psychological test. Who still has the energy to be happy in an overstimulated environment, and who is starting to get tired and wants to withdraw. And that's when something else began to become clear. Even within this stratification, Fremont was giving birth to a new symbol of privilege. A place that shows downtown is also learning to sell tranquility as a commodity. And to understand what that privilege looks like, let's look at the Golden Nugget, where fun began to be sold by the floor. Beneath the dazzling canopy of Fremont, the Golden Nugget emerges as a symbol both familiar and strange. It's like a time machine that takes you back to old Vegas, where classic signs, traditional casinos, and a nostalgic atmosphere still thrive. But the Golden Nugget is also a very modern sign. Even downtown is entering a new era where experiences are no longer sold based on emotion, but are sold by price tier, by privilege. Here, privilege doesn't necessarily mean the glitzy, strip-style luxury. It's not about who can buy a $5,000 suite or book a private table for the evening. It's a more subtle difference. And perhaps that's why it's more unsettling. That's the difference between those who can afford to buy peace, cleanliness, stability, and those who can only stroll through the free part of Fremont, but have to bear the full friction of street life, noise, crowds, overstimulation, and the sense of uncertainty that always lurks in public spaces. This is where the saying, "Vegas isn't worth it anymore," starts to take on a deeper meaning. People don't just talk about the price. People are talking about being charged for something that should be the default, the right to feel normal. When experiences are tiered, People don't just pay to have fun, people pay to avoid getting tired. And it was a cold shift, from entertainment to self-preservation. This frustration isn't just about the expensive items on the strip, it even spread downtown, in a different form. Debates about hidden fees and junk fees. Even things once considered friendly Vegas promises, like comps and loyalty programs, have become points of contention. There are lawsuits related to the transparency of fees and taxes when exchanging comps through loyalty programs. What makes these stories particularly painful is that they hit viewers right in the gut. The feeling of being lured in by the words free or comp, only to be charged at the end. Not because they couldn't afford it, but because they felt they were being treated as easily manipulated. Perhaps downtown is also learning to sell tranquility as a commodity. And that's when Fremont was no longer an escape from the strip. It became a mirror. If even downtown was entering an era of fees and privileges, where could the average American find a cheap and cheerful Vegas? And then the story shifts to the Fremont experience, something created as a promise that downtown will become a desirable destination. The Fremont experience is a very Vegas infrastructure solution. Lights, music, shows, crowds, like an endless festival. The LED dome covering the sky made the night as bright as day, turning the entire neighborhood into a giant stage where everyone was an audience member, and sometimes everyone was an actor. But that very structure created a paradox that Fremont had to live with. The more people it attracted, the more it became a place prone to conflict. In a tight, noisy space, even a small collision can escalate into a major incident. And even the serious events don't happen every day. Just a few incidents being widely shared is enough to change perception. That's the most expensive thing about Fremont. Not the cost, but the possibility that one bad moment could define the entire trip. There have been fights and explosions reported by local media in the area near the Fremont Street experience, some with no casualties and others with serious consequences. These incidents are not enough to conclude that Fremont is the most dangerous city in America, but they're enough to make the phrase "worst nightmare" spread like a reflex, especially among those unfamiliar with the open urban environment where crowds aren't filtered by resorts or private corridors. Fremont wasn't without governance efforts. The organization that operates the Fremont Street experience itself issued a reassuring message outlining safety, security, and surveillance measures. That means there are people trying to keep this place standing. But the question here isn't just, is there security or not? The question is light enough to retain memories? Can a destination survive if it always has to be brighter to hide the cracks beneath? And when the memories people bring back are no longer happy, but tense? What happens to return? Tourism? People might come once out of curiosity, but they only come back when they feel welcome. As Fremont began to tire people out before they could even enjoy themselves, old Vegas didn't disappear in the lights. It disappeared in feeling. Street performers are the DNA of Fremont. This is something the Strip can't fully replicate. Live music, costumes, direct interaction, and a kind of street energy that makes you feel like you're stepping into the real old Vegas. Fremont lives off this heat. It's the most fascinating part of downtown, and also the most difficult to control. But at the same time, Fremont is also a place where the economy is focused on operating at high speed. Street performers live on tips. Tips come from attention, and attention comes from intensity. And when intensity becomes the way to compete, content tends to escalate. Louder volumes, more shocking behavior, stronger interactions, sometimes interactions that cross boundaries. In urban observation, people often talk about disorder cues. Signs of disorder such as noise, drunkenness, encroachment, minor arguments, which can make a person perceive the environment as less safe even before any crime has occurred. Fremont is particularly sensitive to this because it's crowded, open, and overstimulating. The more queues there are, the easier it is for tourists to feel stressed. The issue is even more complex because Fremont is not just a tourist street, it's public space, and therefore it's tied to a very American legal question. Freedom of expression. The ACLU of Nevada previously sued Fremont Street Experience, LLC, and the City of Las Vegas regarding First Amendment rights, and the case was settled. This shows that tightening the reins on performers is not just about tourism management, but a balancing act between public freedom, safety, and experience. If Fremont is too tightly controlled, it loses its identity. If it's too loosely managed, Fremont loses its sense of security. But if boundaries aren't managed, the first to leave won't be tourists. It will be the locals. Because locals don't need to go through the trouble to have a fun night. They have other options. Locals aren't leaving Fremont because they hate downtown. They left because they felt downtown was no longer designed for them. A place that was once a familiar hangout spot gradually became a space where they had to mentally prepare to enter, as if attending a crowded event. And when entertainment starts to feel like endurance, people will naturally withdraw. When locals withdraw from a neighborhood, the neighborhood loses something intangible but extremely powerful: social ownership. The feeling that those who live there will intervene, maintain standards, and mitigate chaos. Locals are the cushion that keeps a place from sliding downhill. When they disappear, the neighborhood might still be busy, but the soft norms will thin out faster. This sentiment also aligns with what viewers often say in the comments. They're not just upset about the high price. They were annoyed because they felt unwelcome. And this is where the story is no longer about personal feelings. It has a point of confirmation from the business itself. The CEO of MGM once said they lost control of the narrative regarding pricing, citing the example of 2 drinks as an image issue. Although those words didn't mention Fremont, they reflected a broader reality. Vegas is gradually losing the hospitality narrative that brought people back. When the belief that Vegas is a place to unwind is shattered, locals are the first group to retreat. Because they have other options: staying home, going to a casino near their house, or going somewhere with less friction. Tourists might still visit Fremont out of curiosity or for its value, but locals won't come back if they feel like outsiders in their own city. It's noteworthy that no-go zone policies can make Fremont look cleaner in the short term. But if the locals still leave, the soul is still lost. And when the soul is lost, small businesses are the hardest hit, because they don't live off the crowd once. They live off repeat. Customers. Fremont doesn't become empty when the locals leave. It's getting more crowded. Just crowded in a way that makes everything harder to save. With only transient customers and the economy to consider, Fremont will be pulled toward volume rather than value. And that's the shortest path to turning a nostalgic place into an exhausting one. Fremont didn't collapse in the way that one day it was beautiful and suddenly became chaotic. It slid downhill in a more dangerous way, one small but continuous step at a time, like a descending elevator that one only realizes has gone too far when it's already gone too deep. The typical cycle of an urban destination often begins with something very difficult to measure: the experience becoming tired. No need for a disaster. If enough people feel the trip isn't worth it, and they start coming back less. When customer returns decrease, businesses are pushed into a pragmatic choice: surviving on weekends and crowd volume. And when a neighborhood lives on volume, it's always pulled toward intensity. Fremont is stuck in this cycle because it doesn't have the same ability to filter experiences as the Strip. Strip is a huge private asset. It can eliminate troublemakers right at the door, redirect crowds, and conceal incidents through internal mechanisms. Fremont doesn't. Fremont is a public space. And public space doesn't just organise recreation. It also has to bear all the problems that a major tourist city tries to avoid. In 2025, local news reports consistently documented dangerous situation near Fremont and the East Downtown area. It's not to scare you, but because just by increasing the frequency of news, perception changes. Tourists may not be in real danger, but they will bring back an unpleasant story, and that unpleasantness spreads faster than light. Notably, the downward spiral is not solely due to security. It also comes from a belief in value. A type of scandal that audiences are very interested in is hidden fees and price transparency. The lawsuit involving Circa and how fees, taxes, are disclosed when redeeming comps is an example of downtown hitting a sore spot, being promised something that sounds free, but ultimately still being charged for it at the end. That's the kind of feeling that makes people lose goodwill. And when goodwill is lost, they don't just get angry, they leave, despite management efforts. But a city cannot simply reduce crime by banning things, because even if the number of cases decreases, Fremont could still decline if the friction of experience doesn't. Noise, overstimulation, hidden fees, and a sense of unpredictability. Fremont Street is not just a street. It's like a mirror placed right in the middle of Las Vegas, where the city no longer has enough distance to hide the things it doesn't want to see. Perhaps Fremont isn't the worst in America, statistically speaking, but it could be the earliest indicator of what's happening with Vegas. A city that once sold joy as a promise now seems to be selling joy as a product. And sometimes selling a sense of security as a privilege. And if Fremont is truly the canary in the coal mine, then the question isn't just for Las Vegas. It's for all of America. When cities live on tourism and experiences, who will pay the price for the glitz? If you've ever had a memory in Fremont, whether good or bad, leave a comment. I'd like to hear your story. And if you find this video thought-provoking, please hit the like button so YouTube knows this is content that should be recommended. Share it with someone who loves Vegas, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes about the hidden sides of American cities. This video was created for the purpose of analysis, commentary, and storytelling based on publicly available information and cited press, local reports. The content is not intended to provide an absolute conclusion on the safety level of any area, and is not intended to defame or attribute blame to any individual, group of people, or community.